and welcome to episode 69 of Gar Borras Time Machine. Can't believe we've done that many episodes, Gar, and today is going to be a real fun one and a first because for the first time ever in the history of our show, we're going to be looking at Bill Cosby Himself, which is a stand-up comedy routine he did back in 1983, and we're going to talk all about that, and we're also going to get into the discussion of Bill Cosby's fall from grace, if you will, a few years back. And again, this is the first time we've ever looked at a stand-up comedy routine, and you know that's how many comedians got their start back in the day. But this was when a time in the early '80s when a lot of these comedians started releasing these performances on videotape, VHS, beta. You remember that time in your life, Gar?
You know, it was a way of life back in the '80s. It was what everybody looked forward to going to the video store.
Yeah.
It was the closest experience to the enjoyable experience of going to pick out a video back then. Was in the 70s going to a record store.
Yeah.
They're so similar because they have the same effect. Music lovers going and leafing through the records, and it was such an enjoyable experience to go to these places, and most of the time. In the early periods of video stores, there wasn't the big chains like the Blockbusters and stuff like that. So most of the video stores were like mom and pops.
Yeah.
And one of the things about that was the video stores always had the porno section.
In fact,
but that's all a lost piece of history now.
In fact, they had a little bit of everything.
That.
Yeah.
But I remember that was how I discovered Bill Cosby himself. That videotape was going shopping at the video store for something to watch.
Yeah.
And it was when we got it, we picked it because it was a comedy one, and somebody, I don't know, maybe somebody said, "Oh, you should watch this, it's good."
Yeah.
But I had no idea how funny it was going to be. I mean, I just remember watching that video and laughing so much and laughing so hard that by the end of the video, my sides truly hurt.
Wow.
That saying, laughing. Well, this was a case where that really did happen. It was that fun. Honestly, I think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And it's so horrible because at that time I had no idea about him as a person or anything like that.
Yeah, none of us did.
I just knew him. See, you have to understand. I go back all the way to the '60s when he was on I Spy.
Sure, yeah.
The very, very beginning of his career, and so I knew about Bill Cosby way, way back in the '60s, and in doing some of the research for this. I found out that some allegations were coming out about his tactics and things like that, all the way back to the mid 1960s.
Wow, and yet he was able.
This wasn't a thing that he was doing in the 90s or the 2000s when they busted. No, this is a. I don't know how you would call it, but it's something that dates all the way back, and then I'm conflicted.
Yeah.
Because I really up until I found out about the allegations and everything like that, I just loved his work. And the Jello commercials and the pudding pops and all of that stuff. Maybe I wasn't watching the Cosby Show.
Yeah.
It just wasn't my cup of tea. But I appreciated his work, and it all goes back to that one videotape, Bill Cosby himself. I appreciated everything else he did because I just thought that video was just so funny, and it was just at the top of my list of anything funny that I had ever seen.
Yeah, Gar, that's a very important point to make, and the thing is, I want to give people listening to this kind of the backstory of today's episode, because it's kind of been about a year in the making, and you ask, what's it taken a whole year to make this one episode? Well, because first of all, I'm always looking for ideas for what to do episodes on of Gar Borras' Time Machine, and we want to always keep it fresh and find new things to do. Like I said, today's the first time we've ever done like a stand-up comedy routine, and so I never heard of this show. This is going back a year ago when the idea first came up, and I was reading online. Bill Cosby himself. What is this? And I started reading how all these legendary comedians and people like Jerry Seinfeld thought it was just the funniest thing, and I'm like, I never heard of it. So I was able to go on YouTube, and it's on YouTube. I checked out a couple of clips, and then I'm like, I want to get this video. I want to see it in its entirety. So I got it for like $6 or $7 off of Amazon. I ordered it, and I just watched it last night. But when we first started having conversations about doing an episode on Bill Cosby or himself, your initial response, well, I love that comedy special, but I don't know if I want to do an episode on Bill Cosby because of everything that's gone down with him the last couple of years. And so we held off on it a little bit. And I brought up the idea again about a month ago because I seen it sitting on my on my shelf of DVDs. I thought I still haven't watched that. We got to do an episode on that. So I told you know what, Gar, let's do this. Let's do an episode on Bill Cosby and the comedy special himself. But let's have an honest look at it. Let's be honest about everything and the good, the bad, the ugly, kind of. And we're just kind of getting into it because again, I watched it for myself for the very first time ever in my life last night, and I'll admit there are parts that funny. Probably the funniest part to me was the part about the dentist, but I had kind of a different take because I'll admit there were funny parts, but I think the fact that his son is now, his son was murdered a number of years ago. It was his only son. And I'm watching this last night, and he comes across, and again, I get it's a routine, but comes across as very angry, talking about his children, like saying all children are brain damaged, and that his son was an idiot because he always went around with his fly down and stuff like that. And he did not paint a wonderful picture of his wife. Like he said, his wife was beautiful until she had children. And so again, the time frame, being what it is today and all the stuff that's since happened, it played a role in my thought process while watching the movie.
Wow. Yes. And that kind of plays into why I really didn't want to watch it.
Yeah.
Simply because, knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy and everything, and just how blatant, he just.
Yeah.
You look at it in a completely different perspective than a person would when you watched it for the first time way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And people now don't really understand this, but all the way up until about the 1990s, casting couch, men being misogynistic, and how men treated all of that stuff was acceptable behavior.
Oh yeah.
And then in about the 1990s, that is about when it started. It didn't happen, but it's when it started to degrade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it started becoming unacceptable behavior. And then by the 2000s, then it just these people that had been doing all of these things all of their lives and getting away with it, the Harvey Weinsteins and all of these people, because Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein are not the only people that were doing these things.
They just wanted to get caught.
There were a ton of people that were doing these things.
Yeah,
and so it was an acceptable behavior all the way up until then, and then about 2000, that's when these people started becoming held accountable for their behavior.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to put in perspective.
Oh sure.
Bill Cosby had been getting away with that for literally decades.
Yeah.
Literally decades. In the early years of his career, the accusations were being shut down.
Sure.
And being quieted, and people were being, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Previous to this, those people were shut down, and they were, if they made if you were a person of prominence, you could get away with it.
Yeah.
But if you were a regular person in society, like a you or me, Jason, we would have been held accountable for that same thing back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. But if you were a person of prominence, like a Bill Cosby or a Harvey Weinstein, you had teams to shut those things down.
Yeah, and the thing of it, Gar, is I have to sit here and admit, like you, I'll be honest about it, I, for the longest time, for most of my life, was a Bill Cosby fan. I go back to Bill Cosby, like, on Fat Albert and that, and the Electric Company, and everything that came, after that. And the thing, if you look at the Cosby show, it was very influential show because for the fact that it probably had been like the first time a black family, you had a black successful family on TV. Before I don't remember seeing a black doctor ever on TV. And so he was a role model back in the days, and they held Bill Cosby up as a moral authority of the world. He was known as America's father for many years since that show's, the Cosby Show was, launched. And it's a shame what has happened since because, of course, Bill Cosby's had his fall from grace, and a lot of people don't want to have anything to do with him. In fact, since he got out of prison, he was trying to make a comeback, but was not very successful for that very reason alone. But when this all broke a few years back, things like Amazon decided, we're not gonna play the Cosby Show anymore on our platform. We're gonna pull that. And you think that effect that has not only on Bill Cosby, but the other actors that played on that show, they lose income because of that. When things like that happen, they even though they didn't do what Bill Cosby did, they have that stain of Bill Cosby on them, being associated with them, if you know what I mean.
Yes, and that unfortunately that's a product of working with somebody that you really truly don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And none of those people that were working with Bill Cosby at that time
had a clue.
He positioned himself as a moral authority for the black population.
Yeah.
He literally did that. He took advantage of the fact that everybody was promoting him as that role model, America's dad, and all that stuff. But he used that to position himself as a moral authority.
Yeah, in fact,
and he was constantly looking down his nose at everything that the black population was doing and telling them that everything that they were doing wrong, and he's promoting all the problems that you're having in life is because you don't have personal responsibility. He was literally telling the black population that at the time, that they were blaming their problems on other people when they actually were their own problem, and they would cure their own problems if they would take personal responsibility for their own problems.
Yeah, and
he started doing that, and then it turns out he starts getting accused by over 60 women of drugging and raping them. Now, the old saying, if you smell smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
Well, how can you look at that 60 women and say that, oh, there's no smoke here?
Yeah, and Gar, okay, now this is a perfect place to bring this up, because talking about Bill Cosby being the alleged moral authority back in the day, during this comedy special, another thing that stood out to me is there's one point where he's talking about, how people act when they drink and do drugs. And so in that one section part of the film, it says, I noticed Bill Cosby, when talking about teenagers drinking and doing drugs, who have never done drugs before, he says it's all right because they are just experimenting. Again, this is a guy that labeled himself, and many of us did too at the time, the moral authority. Oh, it's all right for teenagers to do drugs because they're just experimenting. And again, I get this as a comedy routine, but a guy who's a moral authority at the time, you think you might do something different when talking about drugs in your routine,
Well, he was also saying his opinions about drugs too, and looking down his nose at people, on that issue too.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just the classic where he took advantage of everything and advantage of his prominence, and instead of using it for something good, he was looking down his nose at people and pointing his finger at people and just just being this. Hiding behind his moral authority and all of that stuff. He has a track. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
He has a track record that goes all the way back to 1965.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when that's that's a lot of smoke. That's a lot of smoke. And when it was happening back in the early 60s, it was being shut down. And he was never held accountable. And think about that. He was never held accountable until around the year 2000.
Yeah.
The walls started closing in on him around 2000. But he went all the way from the mid-60s to 2000 getting away with what he was getting away with, and at the same time as getting away with it, looking down at his nose at all these people that were not doing anything anywhere close to what as bad as what he was doing.
Oh yeah, and Gar, the fun thing here and looking back is like I got to admit that when I think of my image, if I'm honest about it, of Bill Cosby, very much like yourself, I remember him from all those Jell-O commercials, and when he was doing commercials for Coca-Cola and stuff and Diet Coke. That is what I remember him, or Fat Albert, and he was funny back in the day. And what was the biggest difference probably in the world compared to the 1970s and 80s to the 2000s? Social media was around. In fact, if you remember what actually brought Bill Cosby down, none of these allegations really, it kind of stopped at that point until an up-and-coming black comedian was trashing Bill Cosby in his routine, saying, "No, Bill Cosby, people think he's a moral authority," something to that effect, and saying, "No, I'm not so impressed with Bill Cosby. I've heard things about him." And after that, one comedian said this, an up-and-coming guy, not even somebody all that famous at the time, makes this comment in a small club. It goes viral on the internet, and then all of these women start coming out, and because of what one guy said. I think that's the biggest difference between the 1970s and the 2000s. Yes, social media.
Because see, previous to that, a person of prominence and a person of like huge wealth could have teams to shut these things down.
Exactly.
And you have spin doctors to put spin on it, so you can quash it and make it seem like it's not as big of a deal as it is.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that's what a spin doctor was.
Yeah. You thought
all those times when that band, all I knew was that band called Spin Doctors. But spin doctors are hired people to put a spin on negative things, and take the sting out of it, and take the effectiveness out of it, and make it ineffective. And so you could do that back then, but you can't have a team. You can't squash with the internet now. It goes viral too quick, and a team can't shut that down. So you're 100% right about that. That's the difference. That difference right there is what is making these people that have been getting away with these horrific acts for so long. They can't get away with it anymore, and now they're being held accountable. And this is not, this is across the board. You can be Chinese, you can be black, you can be white, you can be any nationality. And when you have power, there are people that will take that power and they will use it for good. And there will be other people that would take that power and use it to their advantage for horrifically bad things.
And Gar, and talking about this comedy special, Bill Cosby himself, well, he called it himself because it's supposedly based on stuff that, from throughout his life. And you can hear that when you're watching the video. So it's stuff that he's talking about that he actually went through in his life. And the thing about it was, at this point in 1983, when this was released, like I said, a lot of people were these comedians were starting to release their live shows. Let's come out with a comedy special on video. People can check it out. And then another thing that happened with that was, Bill Cosby is one of, classic kind of type of comedians that got his start in the clubs. But up until the 1980s or so, you didn't really see comedians go like on cross-country tours. That once they started making these home video specials, and people were buying them, people started to realize, they take rock bands across the country on a national tour. Why can't a comedian do that? And that was this era. And I was reading that at this time, Bill Cosby, he's a well-established actor, like we said. He's had a successful career at this point, and this is even before the Cosby Show premieres, like a year later in 1984. And so what I was reading is Richard Pryor, who was a kind of up-and-coming comedian, just got his start in his big break like in the late 1970s. Pryor had a lot of success with these comedy specials, and so Bill Cosby got together with his people and said, I want to do what Pryor's doing. I want to have a comedy special of my own, and that's what this was.
I unfortunately, I didn't want to watch it, in preparing for this, because I just don't want, I was really worried, because remember when you brought this up, I was against doing this episode, and it was because of, my feelings now, about him, and what really, just turned me off was the hypocrisy. You know what I mean? How he was positioning himself as this moral authority, and it turns out he is worse than everybody else that he was giving crap about. You know what I mean? And it's just that is what, the ultimate to me, what, and then finding out, the kids, that you're talking about in Bill Cosby himself, where he's celebrating his kids and everything, and talking about, brain damage and all that stuff. He thinks that, young boys have brain damage, or if I remember correctly, because I haven't seen it.
Well, actually, this is what kind of I was left the impression watching the whole thing from beginning to end. because it's a theme throughout the film that children, not just his, but all children are brain damaged, and so
that's it. And
so,
I remember that.
And so I'm left feeling like, okay, this is a guy that I've learned from watching has 5 children, 4 daughters, and 1 son. 1 son has since been murdered. Listening to the way he talks about children.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. His son gets murdered. These kids he's talking about in this video.
Yeah.
His son gets murdered. His daughter.
Yeah, I read that.
His daughter
died.
Bill Cosby let the world champion boxer Mike Tyson off the hook for attempted rape of his daughter. What father would let any man off the hook for attempting the rape of your daughter? Who does that?
Yeah.
What father does that? And when he talks about his daughter, he talks about her very negative publicly. His public statements about her addiction, there were moral problems. She has moral problems. And he never acknowledged that the Mike Tyson attempted rape factored into her drug addiction. And he continuously admonishes young women for their sexual activity. This is how he was. I mean, that is just outrageous amounts of hypocrisy.
Yeah, and Gar, also, I forgot to mention, so his one and only son, since this came out a number of years ago, was murdered. Also, he had a daughter that also died. Something with her eye, and she tragically died too. So he's had 2 children that have died, and like he was talking about also when he's talking about his children at the beginning of all this, that talking about the first time he became a father, and he's telling everybody how he was going to have a son, and he was looking so forward to having a son, following his footsteps and this and that, and he was so disappointed. It was a girl. It was a girl.
Yeah, well, but that was common behavior.
Yeah.
Of fathers at that time.
Yeah.
And you hear about it a lot, how some daughters became tomboyish
because
of how disappointed their father was that they weren't a boy. Can you imagine how a girl just try to put yourself in the position of a girl that would go that far to please their father, knowing that their father was disappointed that they weren't a boy, and how that mentally affects their daughter. But that was not a one thing of him. That happened a lot back in those days. Fathers treating their daughters, letting them know that they were disappointed that they weren't a boy.
Yeah, and the way he describes his wife throughout the thing, you just imagine. And again, this is fresh in my head because I watched it just last. He leaves the impression his wife was always whacking the kids, and he was a cool one. The one that he was kind of the only sane one in the house if you listen to Bill Cosby. But the impression he leaves of his wife, and he's like, "Oh, my wife was beautiful till she had children." I'm just like, who? And again, it's comedy routine. I get.
Well, and see that all went by me. I don't remember any of that, but I mean, hearing it now has a completely different, unacceptable. That comment is unacceptable now.
Yeah.
And this is a change. There have been things that have been going on that have been acceptable in society, and once around 2000 hit and the internet, they both go hand in hand. That changed. And now these people are being held accountable. the worst perpetrators. There are a lot of people that, because nobody it's not everybody's does it to the same degree.
Yeah.
There are some people that will do this type of behavior to a certain degree. Some people will go way past that. Some people will just touch on it. So, but there is that element that it was acceptable behavior in society for many, many decades previous to that. And there is a lot of documented proof. All you have to do is go back and look, and you can see what was acceptable. You see it in movies. You even see some of these things that are unacceptable now, in old Disney movies.
Oh, sure.
And old movies from the 30s and the 20s. Now, say, for example, a very funny singer, actor, comedian was a guy named Al Jolson way back in the 20s.
Sure.
And what was he famous for?
Singing and dancing.
No. Singing and dancing in blackface.
Oh, okay, yes.
That is what he was famous for.
Yeah.
Think about that. That is what he was famous for. That now is completely and totally unacceptable.
Yeah, and Gar, another reason for doing a show like we're doing today is to kind of, for the first time ever in the history of our show, kind of put a huge spotlight on stuff like this, because again, we do a pop culture show, and when talking about pop culture, we got to admit that a big part of pop culture these days is the cancel culture, and that's a big part of what we're talking about. And even talking about a guy like Bill Cosby, because he was hugely successful for many, many years. People thought he was just the funniest thing, since sliced bread. I mean, he had a very successful career, and then when he fell from grace, he fell from grace. It was, in such a huge way. But also at the time, I remember people saying, wait a minute. I don't know if we can criticize Bill Cosby because, wait a minute, he's a famous black comedian. He's black, so we're not allowed to criticize, which I don't get that. I mean, black, white, whatever you are, I think there's right and then there's wrong, if you know what I mean. And I think that should not even play a role, because I also remember when the allegations started. And I guess, to her credit, his wife stood by him. I remember her making comments like, oh, they're just coming out with these allegations, these women, because they want to bring down the most powerful black man there is. And at the time, he was. But, again, and then there is that aspect of dealing with all this.
Well, as far as political, that's not my area
no.
that I'm really going to go.
Yeah, I get you.
He's this whole thing is previous to that, you could get away with it.
Yeah.
The Harvey Weinsteins and the Bill Cosbys of the world could get away with it. With anything, there is. You can take virtually anything.
Yeah.
And there is a negative side to it, and there is a positive side to it. You can virtually take anything, and there is that. But, when, it's when not everybody does everything to the same degree.
Yes.
And when you have cancel culture and stuff like that, there are going to be some people that just basically cancel for the right reasons.
Sure.
But not everybody that's going to be in the cancel culture. There's going to be some people in the cancel culture that have bad intentions.
Yeah.
And only want to cancel to hurt people.
Sure.
And so you have to look at the cancel culture clearly and see the entire picture, and not just look at one element of the cancel culture.
Yeah.
And just understand that the bulk of the cancel culture really is for the right reasons.
Yeah.
To hold people accountable. But there are going to be elements of the counter, and you can virtually take virtually anything that we talk about.
Yeah.
The sun coming up in the day. There can be something positive about that, and there can be something negative. You can literally take anything, and there is a positive part of it and there's a negative part of it. You can't have black without white.
Yeah.
You can't have daylight without sun, without nighttime. You can't have plus without subtraction. Virtually everything that we know of has a positive and a negative side.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like saying, "Oh, why is that guy always so happy? He must be on something. What drugs? He must be a druggie. What is he?"
There's going to people that are going to look at that. They're happy that guy's happy.
Yeah.
And there's going to be other people that are going to look at that guy and they're going to try to see something wrong with it. That's an element of society that shapes our society, and the end result is all of these things get kind of regurgitated by society and comes out with what society determines as what is going to be acceptable and what is not going to be acceptable. Yeah. And when you compare society in 2000 to society in 1950, oh my God, the difference is stunning.
Yeah, and
what was acceptable back in 1950 it's just stunning how much of that is unacceptable now.
Yeah, and I think part of the thing with Bill Cosby's fall from grace is, I remember when it first happened, he kind of had the attitude, him and his wife, that they thought he'd be okay. They didn't really think, and then when it hit, especially I remember hearing that he was found guilty and he actually did prison time because of this, and this is stuff that happened.
I don't think he served enough time.
I agree with you there. I mean, and I dare say that he would still be in prison if it was not for the fact that he was Bill Cosby. I will say I am at least he did some time, and what I mean by that is there are other people that have done similar things that just went off scot-free. So this guy never thought he'd go to prison. He thought his fame would save him, and he was wrong there. But I do think in Bill Cosby's case, I mean, let's be honest, he's almost 90 years old. He's I think 86 or something like that. And like I said at the top of this, he was planning to make a comeback, but nobody was interested in touching Bill Cosby because he's got such a stain on him. And so I think we have our memories of Bill Cosby, but I don't think he's ever going to do anything again of any merit.
No, he's not. Yeah. He did it all to himself.
Yeah.
How he was admonishing the black population, for their style of dress and
looking like gangsters. I remember. Yeah.
And then it turns around. Let's put it this way: for a guy that made such a huge deal about personal responsibility, where the hell is he taking responsibility for drugging and raping women? All dating all the way back to 1965. Yeah. Where is his personal responsibility? His Mr. freaking look down your nose at everybody else, in black society. Yeah. I am just I completely understand why black society has just abandoned him. Yeah. Who would stay with a guy like that?
Yeah, especially when all this breaks and you're like, oh, this is a guy that was a moral authority sticking his finger in everybody's face, telling everybody else how to act. Who the hell is he? And the funny thing about all this, Gar, as far as his fall from grace, is what really did him in, because he got away with it even when the allegations coming out at first, and then more and more women came forward. But before all that, and before he was found guilty, like a lot of celebrities, Bill Cosby had this cockiness to him, because even after the allegations came out, he denied it and said he was going to beat all this, and unfortunately he didn't. But I remember what really did him in was he forgot, a lawyer somewhere got a hold of an affidavit where he wrote out, he admitted foolishly that he'd given one of the girls a drug, and he forgot about that, and then he tried to get that file so it wouldn't go public, but what ended up doing him in is what something he owned that he wrote about, giving somebody one of those girls a drug, kind of admitting to it in the court paperwork, and he forgot about it. It was just the cockiness.
You know what that's called?
Yeah.
That's called a smoking gun.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. You know, he would. You know, we talked when we were discussing doing this. And I was, voicing my, hesitance of wanting to do this. When we were talking about it, you know, I remember I had brought up that he was a frequent guest of Hugh Hefner's at the mansion. Yeah. At the same time that he was Mr. Moral Judgment.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the moral judgment specialist.
Yeah.
And at the same, and I remember this at the same time when I saw him there, you know, and I would watch these programs, because they would have specials that would make it to TV, and I just remember, you know, Bill Cosby was like one of the guests, and he was such a highly regarded guest, and he'd be sitting right next to Hugh Hefner. Yeah. You know what I mean? He was just that coveted of a guest of Hugh Hefner's.
Yeah.
Well, then later on, it comes out that there were 60 women accused him of drugging and raping him.
Wow.
1/3 of those 60 women, 21 women, were Playboy bunnies.
Wow. Yeah.
1/3 of the women that accused him of drugging and raping him.
There you go. Yeah.
Were Playboy bunnies. And that just buttered the heck out of me. You know what I mean? That you know, I remember voicing to you.
I remember that.
About my hesitation that when I saw him there way back in the 1980s, it just, for some reason, it just didn't have the right optics to me. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Yeah. I didn't know how to mentally digest it, and I didn't have an opinion at that time. But I just remember that there were question marks above my head. Yeah. When I saw him there, at this, it just. For some reason, it just did not have good optics.
I remember having that conversation with you, which is why I'm glad you just brought it up. But I think we did a pretty fair job here today during this episode of really painting an honest and clear picture. Because like I said, when I think of Bill Cosby, if I'm honest, I remember those Jello pudding commercials. And they were, I even remember my grandmother used to love Bill Cosby, and she'd see those commercials and she'd sit there and actually watch the commercial because he was one of her favorite. She thought he was so funny, you know. And I remember thinking those commercials were so cool. Oh, Bill Cosby, he's doing this. And let's talk even about that, because Jell-O, you can still get Jell-O in the store, but do you see any famous celebrity endorsing Jell-O? Any of those famous commercials?
Guess after him, I think they just decided, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's go in a different direction. Yeah. And yes, you're right. Those commercials were heartwarming, and they were warm and fuzzy.
There's a false impression of who the man is.
Yes. You know, it's just, you know, I just. You know, for me, it's just, I can't. When I was seeing it at the time, it was warm and fuzzy. Well, now I look back and I see it as a 2-picture screen.
Cover up.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now it's on the left side of the picture is the warm and fuzzy, and the right side of the picture is this rapist. And the fact that he had to use drugs. To to do what he was doing. It's not okay. You brought this up earlier.
Yeah.
Not only did he hurt the careers of literally all of the other co-stars that were on the Cosby Show with him, those weren't the only people. He literally hurt every cause of the black population at that time.
Yeah.
He did serious damage to the black cause of the time.
Yeah.
So he literally hurt everybody that was in his universe.
His orbit, yeah. I mean,
his orbit, yes.
I dare say, Gar.
He did so much damage over and beyond his sickness of having to drug women to be able to have sex with them. Tell me that's not a sickness.
Oh, sure. And I dare say, Gar, like I said, the man's never going to do anything again. The next time we're ever going to hear from Bill Cosby is when they report the man's death, and
it's sad because previous to all of that, I was a huge appreciator of all of his work.
Yeah, I mean,
he truly was a funny man. But now when you look back at it with a split screen. Virtually everything he does, it's with looking back, the picture of that, but also knowing what he's guilty of now.
Yeah,
and it's just, how could anyone think that you ever could recover for something like that?
Yeah, and it just never will. And Gar, I think. I think doing this episode, they showed me something that, we went a place with our show today that we've never gone in the history of a show, and it wasn't all roses, if you know what I mean. Usually we'll talk about a classic movie or a TV show or something that we're really a big fan of and that we love, and we're just kind of encouraging people to go check it out. This was a little more than that, and I think when people listen to this, we can say that this was an honest, heartfelt show in the sense that we were honest about it. I do think, if I'm honest here, that if I had seen this comedy special when it first came out like you, probably like a lot of people, I would have thought it was just as funny as hell and hilarious. But because I saw it when I did, all the stuff that I know now, his son being murdered and all this, and he had a daughter that died, and the way he was talking about his family.
He had a daughter that was raped attempted to be raped by Mike Tyson, and he doesn't even back her up.
Yeah.
All he does is publicly humiliate her.
What kind of family man does that? America's dad.
Yes. What does that tell you about him as a father?
Yeah, and again, I would love you, like, when you have some downtime, to just watch this again and see if your opinion changes like mine did. Like, again, my opinion didn't really change because I'm seeing this for the first time and looking at it with fresh eyes of what I know about the man today. At one point he's talking about becoming a father for the first time, and I wanted to be son. We talked about that. But then another thing he did, talking about first experience of becoming a father, seeing the baby's head come out, and he goes, oh man. You're talking about his daughter now. Most people, the impression they have is, oh, my child's being born. This is he says the child comes out, he looks at it. Oh, she was just the ugliest thing. I like, wow. Wow.
Well, it's so. I'm really glad that I didn't rewatch it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just have a feeling that that split screen effect would have really just it probably would have caused me to probably turn it off anyway.
Yeah, and if I'm honest,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just it's such a stark difference between how I felt about him before all of this wound up happening. I had a completely different
experience
and a huge appreciation of his how funny he really was. I mean, he just truly was a great comedian, and I don't think that will ever be taken away from him. How great of a comedian he was, but unfortunately, he is the person behind why he is most likely going to wind up fading into obscurity.
Yeah. And I think it's already starting to happen because, like I said, I don't know if you came across this, Gar, when doing the research for this. I sent you a little tiny Wikipedia I found on Bill Cosby himself, but there wasn't a ton of information, and I searched out other articles, but I was very surprised that I really couldn't come across too much information about it. Because I think that's partly, and it's interesting because a lot of comedians, like I said, I read how much people just loved this film when it came out, yet there's so little written about it, so little that you can find on the internet. So that's further proof that they're trying to bury anything Bill Cosby related. I'm not sitting there.
I don't think anybody's trying to bury it. I think it's just taking its natural, organic course.
Yeah. Maybe so. And like I said, I will sit here and end this episode telling you I'm not going to say I'll never watch an episode of Fat Albert. That was from my childhood. I loved it. My opinion of stuff like that hasn't really changed, but seeing this for the first time, and I think that's what's great about doing an episode like this. Your reaction you had was quite different because you seen it when it first came out. And so I think that's more of an honest reaction. But mine was honest too in the sense that that's how I reacted to it. That's how I reacted to it. And that's
yes. I think your reaction. Most people would have the exact same reaction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Knowing now what you know, and it's stuff like this that shapes pop culture.
Sure.
It's not all. Looking at people.
Roses.
There's a large amount of people that look at pop culture as people that appreciate it are looking at the world with rose-colored glasses and that kind of thing. But no, there's that element of it, but there's also negative elements that shape pop culture.
Yeah.
And this is one of those negative elements that's having a profound effect on society, which society is really the ultimate chooser of what pop culture is at that particular time.
Yeah, and you know what I love about today's episode, Gar, is the fact, and this kind of just goes to touch upon why we do this show. I mean, we do love looking back, like when we did our look at the 50th anniversary of Happy Days, 50 years of Happy Days. That was a real fun episode because, again, it's looking back on something that we have fond memories of. It takes us back to a time in our life where, man, I wish I could go back. They don't make TV shows like they used to, and we have fun talking about it. But I love the fact that you had such a huge reaction, such a loving, happy reaction when you saw Bill Cosby himself for the very first time. I love the fact that, kind of like what I'm saying, you're like, I don't want to ruin my perception of how I think about that, so I'm just not going to watch it again. Because that's the whole point, is this these shows, these movies that we talk about when we do these episodes, most of the time we have fond memories. And I dig the fact that you don't want to crush your fond memory, so we're just not going to watch that again.
Well, but it's a slice of that, but it's also another slice of I just don't want to celebrate a career of a person that is that horrible of a human being.
Yeah, and I don't think he's celebrating.
And he is. It was fine with him being that way as long as it remained behind the curtain.
Yeah, in fact, I don't think we celebrated Bill Cosby at all today. We just took an honest look at the man.
No. But I personally felt that if I rewatched it, that I just couldn't bring myself to do it because I felt that I would be celebrating it, and that's what I just couldn't bring myself to do.
Yeah, and I was kind of I don't want to say forced because I did watch it last night. for the simple fact that I'd never seen this thing before, and I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about this. I have to at least see it so I can know what I'm talking about. And so again, I looked at it with fresh eyes, and then also in closing day, as far as Bill Cosby looking at himself as a moral authority back in the day. I don't know if you know any of this, but I seen a video recently on YouTube where somebody was talking who does another pop culture show. They were talking about the fact that that he fired Lisa Bonet, who played his daughter on the show, Denise, because she did a movie at the time, and he didn't like the fact that in the movie she was showing a lot of skin, and let's just say, and what she was wearing, and he didn't approve of it. He didn't approve that. She wasn't representing the Cosby Show in the way he felt she should represent it.
We talked about that too, because I remember, when we were talking about doing this, I brought that up. That he was casting moral judgment like that on the female co-stars of the show. Yeah. He did it he was doing that to her, and he was also doing it to the other younger daughter that was on the show too. Yeah. So he was even doing it to his co-stars, looking down his nose and doing that whole hypocrisy thing, during the time that that show was in the height of its popularity.
Sure, yeah. Well, this is a good, honest, hard look at the man, and I don't know about you, Gar, but I think it was a fun episode in the sense that we were honest, and we gave an honest look at the man's life. And I can't say that there's no judgment on my part, because of course, like you, I don't agree with all this stuff that's coming about the man, but we can take an honest look at his life and give our opinion on it.
Yes, absolutely, and not everything is
rose-colored glasses,
and perfect, and everything isn't all prim and proper like it used to be, like when you watch a 1950s Elvis movie.
Yeah.
It's not all perfect.
Yeah.
This episode brings light to that, and we would not be being true to doing a true and honest one if we didn't do that.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad you finally agreed to doing this, and I didn't want to pressure you, but I thought I was pretty confident that we could do a good show as far as being.
No, you stated your case well, and that's what turned me around. Yeah. You were 100% right.
Yeah.
About what you were saying and everything like that. So when you're right, Jason, you're right.
Yeah. And that's all we'll say. And Gar, 2 weeks from now when we get together again, we're going to do a 2-part special on Sonny and Cher. So 2 weeks from now, part 1 is going to be talking about the kind of the musical history of Sonny and Cher. And of course, Sonny and Cher were a famous musical duo. Cher, early in her career, was a backup singer, and Sonny was a musical producer and songwriter. That's how they met, and we're going to talk all about that. And part 2 is going to be fun because it's going to be about the Sonny and Cher comedy hour. We want to kind of focus on both those things. We want to make a 2-parter out of it because we didn't think we could take a fair look in just one episode.
Man, it's always a warm spot in my heart when we're doing something about, somebody was popular way back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
That's my childhood, and that's, when all of this was all brand new and it was being discovered for the first time. So, I just, I always love doing those kind of episodes.
And then, of course, Gar, after that, when we start getting towards October, we're going to start doing our holiday-themed shows, which is our favorite time of the year, where we're going to start off with some Halloween-themed shows and then move into Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that's going to wrap it up for the rest of the year. It's hard to believe 2024 is almost at an end, but, man, we're not going anywhere.
Well, one of the favorite times of the year for me is Halloween.
Yeah. And during that time, I think one of the first episodes we're going to do is on the classic Wolfman movie.
Oh boy, man! I remember when I was a kid and I saw that for the first time.
Yeah. And we got so much fun to look ahead to. And, as far as the Sonny and Cher one, another reason I decided to do that, besides the obvious reasons, is that's another thing that kind of harkens back to our Ed Sullivan episode, and so we're pulling so many branches from that because there's so many great acts that were just, part of Ed Sullivan history.
Oh gosh, yes.
Well, you take care, my friend. It was great talking to you, Gar.
Absolute pleasure.